After the tone, please state your name.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Mimi Lufkin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. And we're going to be doing a webinar today with the Louisiana Community and Technical College System folks who were not able to attend the training that we did on April 26th through 27th in Alexandria, Louisiana. Let me first say that what I'm going to attempt to do in the next hour and 45 minutes is to smash into that time period a day-and-a-half conference. So get ready. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming and to let you know that there are a couple of technical things I want to share with you. Hopefully, first of all, I'm going to leave the phones open so that at any time during the webinar, if you have a question to ask, you please feel free to interrupt me if you need some clarification about something I'm going to say. But as I said, I'm going to try to cover a lot of information in a very brief time. So I will probably flash by quite a few things on the PowerPoint slides that we won't address in much detail and encourage you to go back and take a look at them later or to even connect with the people who did attend the conference if you have additional questions or wanted some clarification or get a better feel for some of the conversations that they had at the conference itself. The other thing is hopefully all of you have been able to get into Microsoft Office Live Meeting or you're working on it at the moment, and to let you know that we do have someone who is doing some technical assistance with us today around any technical issues you might have. And so if you want to communicate with Greg Nagy, who is our webinar specialist who's at Ohio State University, they sponsor all of our online meetings, you can reach him at Nagy, that's N-A-G-Y .8 at osu.edu via email and communicate with him either that way, or the other way that you can communicate with Greg if you need to is if you look up at the top of the screen, there is on the left-hand side, if you're in the system and you need to ask Greg a technical question, there's a menu item called Q&A, and you can ask questions behind the conversation here via the Q&A box, and I'll ask Greg if he would to keep an eye on that in case a question comes for him on the Q&A.
Okay, I'll do that. I'm going to drop off the phone in a little bit, but I'll be watching it.
Okay, great. The other thing is there are a couple ways you can ask questions. Since we're going to leave the phones open, you can just stop me and interrupt me and ask a question if you want, or if it's something that you don't want to interrupt me at the moment and want to make sure the question gets answered later on, you can also ask a question using the Q&A function as well. So you can just type the question into the Q&A box and hit ask, and it'll pop up on my screen, and I can stop and answer the question at an appropriate point rather than mid-sentence or something like that. Another thing is that on the top right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there is an icon that looks like three pieces of paper sort of layered one on top of the other, and if you put your mouse over, your cursor over that icon, it pops up a little menu item that says Handouts. And if you go ahead and click on that, you'll see that there are 5 items in the Download Handouts folder for you. 2 of them are PowerPoints that I'll be using in today's presentation. And the other 3 are handouts that you might want to download either now, if you can, or after we're done. One is the webinar evaluation, which should pop up at the end of the webinar. Is that right, Greg? Do you have the webinar evaluation automatically set in the system?
Actually, not on this one, no.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
So if we need that, we're going to have to manually send that.
Okay. So if we'll manually send you an evaluation via email. So, Greg, if you have everybody's email addresses, right?
Yes.
I've attended. Okay.
Do we need to get something set up with NPR or?
No, you have the evaluation.
Oh, is that what? Okay.
Yeah.
That document. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
so the evaluation is there, unless you can set it up while we're working on the webinar. Can you do that so it'll come through the system?
No, I'm going to have to send it manually, but I can do that afterwards.
Okay.
So it'll look the same.
Okay. Anyway, you will receive an email from Greg after the webinar is over with a brief evaluation form. If you'll fill that out, that would be great. And then there are two other handouts. One is a worksheet that we use around the 5-step process that I'd like for you to have sort of to reference as we're going along. If you can download that and print it now. If not, you can also download it and have it open in another window on your desktop so you can look at it. And the last handout is called the 5-step process handout, and it has a brief description of a program improvement process that we use that I'm going to sort of take us through very quickly that might help you in thinking about how to create your strategies for your local application plan. Okay, so those are all resources for you. We have, looks like about 9 people on the call, so I'm just going to do a quick roll call and see who's here based on who I think was supposed to attend. And how about, is Gail Connor on the call? How about Marilyn Barnes?
Yes, I'm here, but I'm not actually able to join the meeting on the web for some reason.
And do you have the email that invited you to the webinar? And did you? There's a button on it that says join the meeting?
Yeah, I've clicked it several times.
And it's not taking you anywhere?
No, it actually, it acts like it's going to take me into the meeting, and it actually says I'm connected to the meeting, but I don't see anything.
Okay.
It says I've successfully connected to the live meeting.
And there's nothing on your screen?
Well, just it telling me I've successfully connected in about 7 different languages. That's about it.
Okay.
Now, what it might do is you'll see that in your web browser, but it should open a separate program called Live Meeting.
No, it hasn't done that. I wonder if it's going to be a little different for me since I'm a Mac user.
Yeah. You do have to use the web version with a Mac. But it should guide you through it as you click through it.
Well, I'm actually sitting here with our IT person, and he can't get in either.
Hmm.
Well, maybe you should shut it down and start over, and then when you get to the prompt, is there a prompt about, did you have a prompt about using the web version or installing Microsoft Live Meeting in order to utilize it?
Yeah, we did.
So
okay, and you did the web version?
Didn't we do the web version? We installed live. We installed live, yeah.
Okay, you probably want to try the web version.
Yeah, so maybe go back and start again.
Okay, I'll try that.
Sorry. Okay, how about Dennis Poe?
Here.
How do you pronounce your first name?
Donis.
Donis. Okay, great. Bridget Peters?
Yes.
Thank you. And Tanya Epperson? Nope. Stacy Christoph is here. Hi, Stacy.
Hi, Mimi.
Angela Kennedy? Jane Spradling?
I am here, but I am not connected on the web. I'm still trying to make it work.
Okay. And do you have a quick question so we can help you, or?
I think something just came up.
Okay, this is good.
It's the screen, it looks like the beginning of a slideshow.
That's it.
Oh, hallelujah! I can't believe it.
Good. How about Ellen Hill?
She's here.
Hi, Ellen. Margie Mixon?
I'm here too. Ellen and I are in the same location.
All right, great. Julie Longloy?
Here. We're here.
Hi, Julie. Melba Kennedy? Here. Rebecca Brubacher? Or Sarah Dinger?
Here.
Hi, Sarah. Is Rebecca with you?
No, but she was on a few minutes ago.
And we lost her?
No, she's showing still on.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Rebecca.
I was muted.
I was going to say, you're on mute. Now, that's the other thing. If you want to mute your own phone, please feel free if you have background noise that you think is going to cause any problems. Uh-oh, somebody has their phone muted that has music, so you can't mute if you have music in the background when you mute your phone. Or you put us on hold or something. Thank you, whoever that was. It was nice music, though. All right, let me just make sure. Gail Connor, Tanya Epperson, and Angela Kennedy haven't come on. Okay. Stacy, do you want to make any comments before we start? Welcome, folks, or from the system office?
Well, no, I'll probably just let you roll with it in the interest of time. I'm sure everybody is ready to get rolling. Thank you for doing this again. I'm not sure how many of people on the line have been to one of our conferences, particularly one where I had you there, but welcome back, and thanks for doing this for us again.
Well, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. All right. Well, then we're going to go ahead and get started because we got lots to cover. So although this is the plan for the day that we did for the conference itself, it will be the fast version of this. We're going to do a quick overview of Perkins IV Special Populations provisions so you understand the connections between the Perkins Act and what's going on in regards to special population activities in Louisiana. I'm going to introduce quickly to you the 5-step program improvement process. We're going to talk a little about documenting performance results, how you can look at your Perkins data to help you better analyze gaps in performance between various student groups. I'm going to briefly review root causes, what are the barriers that special population students face, and probably in this section reference some resources that are on our website that would be a place for you to do some more looking. We're not going to do the in-depth exploration piece. We actually had a series of workshops at the conference that we had some experts who came in and did those. Unfortunately, since you weren't able to be there, you're going to miss that one, and you won't have any homework even. That'll be kind of nice, huh? Well, at least not between now and noon. You'll have homework when you get home, and that is we're at home in terms of preparing your Perkins local application. So we'll talk a little bit about evaluation planning, how you're going to evaluate the results of the strategy that you select to implement, and then how that relates to your Perkins local application. And then you'll receive your evaluation via email from Greg. So let's take a look, first of all, at some of the Perkins special populations provisions. And again, let me remind you that if you go out to the handouts section on the top right-hand side, you can actually download this PowerPoint when we're done or now, however you want to do it, so that you can take a look at this more carefully. But we all know that Perkins is about trying to develop more fully the academic and CTE skills of secondary and post-secondary students, and really to build upon state and local efforts around both integration of academic and technical skills, as well as encouraging students to prepare for high-skill, high-wage, high-demand career fields. And there are lots of sections in the Perkins allocation that deal with special populations. All of these sections of the law include language around Perkins. But we're going to focus on just the ones in red quickly for today's presentation. So I want to remind you about who we're talking about when we talk about special populations. They're students with disabilities, individuals who are from economically disadvantaged families, including foster children, single parents, displaced homemakers, English language learners, and individuals who are pursuing for non-traditional careers. Oftentimes, people get the term special populations confused with special education. The only common denominator there is the first item on the list, the individuals with disabilities, but the other groups are different than that. But whenever we talk about special populations, we talk about all of these groups in total. Now, although a lot of my comments today will revolve around issues related to non-traditional career preparation, because Perkins contains two measures, accountability measures regarding this particular population group. But I also want you to think as we're moving along about how the work that we're talking about relates to all the special population groups. But to be clear about what we mean by non-traditional, programs in Louisiana have been identified as non-traditional based on the fact that they prepare students for occupations where one gender comprises less than 25% of the individuals employed in that field. It's not based on the enrollment numbers that you have in your programs. It's based on the employment field's gender balance. So it's employment data, not enrollment data, that makes this definition, just to be clear about that. Also in Perkins, there is a set-aside between $60,000 and $150,000 the states are required to hold of their state leadership funds to provide support and services that prepare individuals for non-traditional fields, and this is done in many different ways, whether it's through professional development, it could be staffing at the state level, mini grants out to locals, all kinds of things, and there are lots of ways that that is being done. As far as reserve funds are concerned, there's also this trigger in Perkins where a state can hold back 10% of its local basic grant to award grants to eligible recipients for career and technical education activities. And in Louisiana, your state has chosen to do this, and this is where the funds come from for your Louisiana's College and Career Transition Program, which may sound familiar to you. I mentioned that there are accountability measures both at the secondary and post-secondary level. Just so you know that the secondary level is held to 6 different measures. They include all of the ones that are up on the screen in front of you: academic attainment, technical skills, attainment of a degree, diploma, graduation rates, placement, and non-traditional participation and completion. The post-secondary accountability measures, there's 5 of them. The only difference between secondary and post-secondary measures are that the post-secondary does not contain a measure for academic attainment. So these are yours: technical skill proficiency, attainment of an industry-recognized credential, certificate, or degree, retention in post-secondary education or transfer to a baccalaureate program, placement in the military service or apprenticeship, placement or retention in employment, and the same non-traditional measures as secondary, student participation in the completion of CTE programs that lead to employment in non-traditional fields. And we're going to focus on the last one a bit here as we move forward. Your state requires that you report data to them, which they then report to the feds in something called a consolidated annual report. And that data is disaggregated for each of the accountability measures, as well as for an enrollment report that you complete by all of these categories. So by gender, by race, ethnicity, and by special population, all singly. So for example, if you want to know what's going on with Hispanic students in regards to their attainment of a industry-recognized credential, certificate, or degree, which is 2P1, the data that you collect should tell you that. You can also tell what's going on between the differences between how men and women are doing in your programs, how students with disability are doing as compared to single parents or displaced homemakers. The only thing about this is unless you have your own data analysis system at your campus, the data that's reported to the state only allows single category analysis. So in other words, you wouldn't be able to tell from the data that's reported at the state level what's going on with Hispanic males versus Hispanic females, or single-parent males versus single-parent females. But certainly if in your institutional research office, that kind of information, much more specific information is available. But just so you know, the data is collected in those categories. There are a variety of required uses of funds at the local level. I'm going to mention just a few of these here. The required uses of funds, you'll notice as you look at these, will look familiar to you because they are repeated in your local application requirements. So your local application plans will ask you to actually address each of these particular requirements and how it is that you're spending funds, for example, to assess how the needs of special populations are being met on your campus, and to provide activities to prepare special populations, including single parents and displaced homemakers, for high-skill, high-wage, high-demand occupations that will lead to self-sufficiency. Now, one of the things to think about is, anywhere in the legislation where it mentions high-skill, high-wage, to me it's sort of code for non-traditional And because typically, at least for women's occupations, those tend to be non-traditional, which are high-skill, high-wage career fields. I want to mention this notion of around the Self-Sufficiency Standard because that language was important to be included in the legislation, and to let you know that there are self-sufficiency standards that have been developed across the country that are based on how much income for a family of a given composition, so whether it's single-parent, two-parent families, how many children, to meet their basic needs without public or private assistance. And includes things like food, child care, transportation, housing, health care, items that are much beyond what's usually done in the local poverty calculations, those kinds of things, or low-income rates. And just so you know that there is a self-sufficiency standard that's been developed for Louisiana, and the link in this website down there at the bottom is where you can access it, so you can take a look at in which parish, what does it cost for a family of 2 with 3 children to, how much income do they need in order to be self-sufficient of a family size like that. So if any of you are doing counseling with students or are looking at wage earning potential in terms of career choice and how that might relate to whether or not it's enough to sustain a family, this is a great resource to use, so I'd encourage you to take a look at it. If you're interested in looking at what occupations in Louisiana are considered high wage, high skill, or high demand, there's also the occupational supply demand system, and that website address is there. If you want to access it, you can either write it down quickly or, again, this PowerPoint you can download and get the information directly off the PowerPoint. But you can go there and there's searchable options for every state, so choose Louisiana and you can take a look at what occupations are considered high wage or high skill or high demand in Louisiana. It's kind of interesting looking stuff, especially for those of you who are doing career guidance and counseling activities or any kind of student advisement or looking at what's going on in program development around certain areas. It'll help with that too.
Mimi, may I interrupt and ask a question?
Absolutely.
Who produces the data that you have just referred to at that web address?
The occupational supply demand data?
Yes.
It's Bureau of Labor Statistics data that this organization pulls and then calculates for each of the states.
Okay, thank you.
The Perkins legislation also includes a variety of permissible uses of funds. So after you've shown that you've met the requirements for the local uses under the required uses of funds, there's a long list of other permissible uses of funds that you can spend the money on. And certainly there are included in that items that deal with special populations. So everything from the language about providing programs for special pops to mentoring and support services, and also for assisting students in transitioning from community colleges to baccalaureate degree programs for special populations too. Now the legislation has some funny notions, I think, in terms of language use around support services and how that's defined. The definition in Perkins legislation for support services includes these 5 items, which look very much like what you might see for an IEP or for services for students with disabilities. But certainly many of these things also deal with how to address particular needs of other special population groups. But there is also language in the legislation that supports the use of funds for direct assistance for students, including transportation, child care, dependent care, tuition, books, supplies, and other services in order to assist students in being successful in career and technical education. The important thing here is that the distinction now in the use of these dollars as compared to Perkins III is that students have to be enrolled in career and technical education in order to be considered eligible for funds for support services or supportive services, either one. The other thing is that the legislation, the language in the conference report was really clear that the idea is that they want you to be, to supplement, not supplant assistance available from non-federal sources. So if, for example, there's funds available for child care from other sources on your campus or in your community, you need to exhaust those resources for your students before using Perkins dollars for those particular uses. So, and I know that you all probably, when you think about the kinds of needs that special populations have, certainly single parents, displaced homemakers, low-income students, these are the kinds of things that many of them need, and there's not nearly enough resources in your Perkins grants probably to meet all those needs. But certainly thinking about how to prioritize them is a useful thing as well. There are additional permissible uses of funds, everything from improving new and developing new programs that meet the needs of these students for high skill, high wage access to career fields, providing programs for adults and school dropouts to complete secondary school education and upgrade their technical skills, providing assistance to individuals who are also receiving assistance under the Workforce Investment Act, and I'm sure many of you do collaborative work with your workforce investment boards and other one-stop systems in your state, and also to support training activities such as mentoring and outreach in non-traditional fields, so for students pursuing non-traditional careers. Your basic grant narrative so includes language in your local, now this is specific to the Louisiana Community and Technical College System's local plan. So the basic grant narrative asks for these things. You have to describe how you're going to review programs and identify and adopt strategies to overcome barriers that result in lowering rates of access for special population students. So that's really sort of the needs analysis piece that's in the legislation. Also to look at how you're going to provide programs to help special populations meet the adjusted levels of performance. You also need to describe how you're going to provide activities that will prepare special populations for high skill, high wage, high demand occupations that lead to self-sufficiency. So you can see the connection here now between this and the language I mentioned before, which is in the law. And describe how individuals who are members of special populations are not discriminated against, and this is more than just having a non-discrimination statement posted on your brochures or materials. It's really about what sort of proactive action are you taking to ensure that special populations have complete access to programs and services on your campus. And lastly, how funds are, what funds are be available to assist students in preparing for non-traditional fields. I know that you have received your local plan document, and when I was at the meeting, I held it up and waved it around because it's about 10 pounds and 7 inches thick. No, I'm just kidding. It's really not that big. Good. I'm glad I heard somebody laughing in the background. But it does, the budget narrative section, if you turn to that section or reference that later, these are the kinds of things that you're asked for. To describe the activity, how much money you're going to spend, what's your expected outcome, what core indicator does that particular activity address, what required use of funds description is included, and it's really, it's what do I want to call it, a numeric reference to a previous list that's in the application form itself, and or if it's a permissive use of funds description. So those two last bullets really are referring back to the list in the application itself, which one of the required or permissive uses of funds you're addressing. So one of the things that we will quickly think about as we do this is the description of your activity and expected outcome. Those are the two pieces that we'll focus on today as we move forward on this, to help you think about what strategies you might want to implement and what outcome you would expect from that. So your timeline for your local application plan, I put available at question mark because at the time the piece had not been released, but you now all have it in your hands. But you're looking at certainly a May deadline for your plan, June review of the submissions, and July 1 will be when the grant approvals will happen. So that's sort of the connection between Perkins and your local application plan. I'm going to skip over a few things here now. And we're going to jump to looking at this process that we've been implementing. Now, the teams that came to the training themselves spent most of the day and a half that we had together working on each of these components. And so since we have an hour and a little bit more, I'm going to try to focus on trying to give you a brief overview of all of this. But to remind you also that on the handout section at the top right-hand side of your page, there is a handout that describes these 5 steps. So we're just going to go right into it, okay? So step 1 is really about documenting performance results, taking a look at what is the problem, where, how do you look at disaggregated data, how do you conduct a performance gap analysis, how do I know whether or not how students are doing as compared one to the other, and what's the trend. When you look at data, it's really hard to look at a single slice, and you'll see, because that's what we're going to do here. What's really better is if you can look at 3 or even 5-year trend data, is the best way to analyze performance results. And we really recommend that local educational agencies do this before they start developing their local application plan, so you have a better sense of what's going on with, especially around the sections related to special populations, because you need to really understand, well, do we need to focus on services for students with disabilities, or is it really more about single parents and displaced homemakers, or what's happening with students pursuing non-traditional careers, and how are they doing on all the measures, et cetera. The other thing is that when you're in a situation where you can do this, if you can benchmark against others in the state, compare your data to what's going on with other leaders, who has the highest performance in certain categories, and what are they doing, that often can be very helpful. This is just a quick reminder of the accountability measures. I'm sure this is very familiar to all of you, so we're going to take a look quickly at what's going on in Louisiana with your data. So in Louisiana, the Louisiana Community Technical College System negotiates with the U.S. Department of Education a performance measure, what they call the FOPL, which is a really hysterical name for a document, but it's the final agreed upon performance level with the state, or excuse me, with the feds for their state average performance. And this is the Louisiana Technical College goal is there, you can see, as well as the community college and university goals, because apparently you have some community colleges and universities that also receive Perkins funds, and those numbers are calculated a little bit differently, because this is all based on baseline data from when Perkins started back in 2006, 2007, and then the idea is to show continuous improvement from one year to the next. But you can see that the participation rate data down here at the bottom for non-traditional is 10.25% for the technical colleges and 9.5% for completion. So participation is 10.25, completion is 9.5. So let's take a look at what's going on with each of these measures as we roll across the board here in Louisiana. This is average performance across all the state for each of the measures in 2009, 2010. I'm sorry, but I'm getting some background noise. If you're having a conversation in your office, or maybe it's me, I'm getting echoing. Is anyone getting echoing in the system? Is anybody there?
Yes, I hear an echo, but it's coming from whenever you talk.
Oh, dear. I'm hearing it, too. Is it making it difficult for you to hear me?
Not difficult to hear you, just annoying.
Well, unfortunately, the only way to fix it probably is to have everybody call back into the conference line, which is going to take a lot of time. So what's the pleasure of the group? Shall we keep moving forward? Anybody want to voice an opinion?
We live with it.
Okay. Okay, so technical skill attainment for 2009-10, you'll see for each of the population groups is displayed on the screen. And the target for Louisiana is 32.5, and the actual is 32.76. So you met your measure for 2009-10. But interesting, you would assume that all populations are doing well considering that, but if you actually take the data and disaggregate it by each of the special population groups, you see that single parents and displaced homemakers are actually doing better than other students. And your lowest performing group on technical skill attainment is limited English proficiency.
Mimi, that's going to be tough.
It's getting worse.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Is this a recording device, perhaps?
I don't think so.
No.
So this is what I'm going to recommend. If everybody, let me try this. You all just stay right where you are, and I'm going to call back in quickly. And if for some reason I don't show up in a minute or two, just hang up and redial the conference call-in number. Everybody still knows it, has it in front of them from their email?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Now, I really apologize for this. I don't know what's going on. But let's all. So hang on tight, and I'll jump out and come back and see if it doesn't help. Okay?
Hello?
Hello?
Somebody going to do karaoke or something?
Well, it seems like we're getting that info on anybody, not just her.
I know, now that I hear everybody talking, maybe we should just all hang up and call it.
Is everybody there?
I would wait a minute.
Yeah, we're here, but it's bad across the board.
So you can still hear it.
Was everybody on mute when she was talking?
Okay, so this is what I'm going to suggest. I'm sorry. If everyone would hang up and call back in, we'll start again. I'm so sorry, but this is going to be really awesome. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Anybody there yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Becky?
This is better.
This is Ellen.
Hi. Is that better, everybody?
Yes.
Much better.
Okay, good. Phew. I'm so sorry. Hopefully it won't happen again. So I'm going to assume that everybody's back in, and I'll just keep going. All right, so interesting how the technical skill attainment data tells us that limited English proficiency and students pursuing non-traditional careers are having some trouble with performance in this particular measure. And we wouldn't have been able to tell that if we didn't disaggregate the data by each of the groups. So this is a good, example of why you want to do this. Let's take a look at the next measure, which is credential, certificate, or degree attainment. Again, the target is 32.5. Your state actually did not meet this measure in 2009-10. But we're looking again at students with disabilities are actually performing at this measure higher than the actual number. Remember, is average of all students. It's all students data there. Where single parents and displaced homemakers are over, again, high. And your limited English proficient and non-traditional students are underperforming. So, again, thinking about, where might you want to look at a strategy in terms of improving this performance. So this is the measure for student retention or transfer. Again, a measure that looks to me like your state's negotiated target is way too high considering where you currently stand, and it may be an issue with the original benchmark data. But considering this is your average performance, students with disabilities, you've got pretty good performance going on overall. Your displaced homemakers are slightly lower than the actual performance. Students pursuing non-traditional careers, again, a little bit lower, but not too bad as compared to what we saw in the other performance measures. And this may mean that your student retention or transfer rates may also be, if you wanted to look at students who didn't meet any of these categories, so sort of the rest of the students, you might actually see that they're performing lower than even your special population groups when it comes to this particular measure. So that would be something to think about. This is your student placement measure. So your target is 76.25, and your actual performance across the state is at 51.11. But in this measure, we're seeing now students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged, and single parents are performing below average. Your displaced homemaker data is high. Limited English proficient data, interestingly enough, is higher than your statewide average, and non-traditional placement is below. So again, looking at placement services, you'd want to think about in terms of special population students, how you might target activities for students with disabilities, limited economically disadvantaged students, single parents, and students pursuing non-traditional careers. If we look at non-traditional participation rates across the state, your target is 18%. Your average performance in 2009-10 was 21.6. And then if you disaggregate by special population groups, you'll see that students with disabilities and displaced homemakers and students who are limited English proficient are participating in non-traditional programs at a higher rate than average, where economically disadvantaged students are lower, and if you have access to data about being able to disaggregate this particular category by male and female, it would be very interesting because certainly non-traditional participation is a strategy for women to get out of poverty. So you'd want to take a look at I mean, that would be something that would trigger in my head. I'd want to take a look at this, maybe disaggregated by gender in addition to economically disadvantaged if I had access to that kind of data locally. And same thing for single parents. Again, assuming these are mostly women, I would suspect with children, we know that non-traditional career preparation is a really good way to increase wage earning potential. So again, these would be two groups you'd maybe want to target in your outreach to get them to participate at a higher rate in your non-traditional programs. And the last measure, which is non-traditional completion rates, if we look at your targeted for the state is 14.25, your actual is 18.96. So your the statewide average is higher than your target, so you met your measure in 2009-10. But again, in terms of comparing your actual performance and then disaggregated by each of the groups, looks like students with disabilities, single parents, and limited English proficient students are representatively lower than the average participation rate, completion rate. What I want to make clear here about this data is that the non-traditional completion measure is calculated. It's not a cohort measure. It doesn't mean of non-traditional students who started, 18.96% of them completed. That's not what this is saying. What this is saying is of all students who complete non-traditional programs, 18.96% of them are of the underrepresented gender group, or non-traditional students, if that's how you think about them. The cohort measurement is actually the measure that would be in your completion measure, which we looked at earlier. So, and the last part of the data that's submitted to the state that goes up to the feds is enrollment data, and enrollment in this particular report is defined as students who are concentrators. So I think if I recall from the workshop, that means students who've attained at least 12 units towards their credential or degree in the post-secondary system in Louisiana. And you can see here, this is female rates of participation in the 16 career clusters over a 3-year time span, so from 2007-8 to 2009-10. And so those clusters where we see underrepresentation of men or overrepresentation of, underrepresentation of men or underrepresentation of women, you can see them by those that are below the 25% line, which would be, sort of approximately in this range. Sorry, I'm not doing it this very straight. But architecture and construction, information tech is a little bit over the category here for what to be considered non-traditional in this case. Manufacturing, funny blip in the data in 2007-8 that looks like a data anomaly. There's probably something weird going on there. STEM is below, your STEM cluster is below 25%, and transportation, distribution, and logistics also. So these particular clusters, you're showing a lower rate of women participating. If we looked at the opposite, so we look at which programs do we have a low participation rate of males in them, then we're talking about education and training, health sciences, and human services. Now, the little bit of danger, because one of the things we talked a lot about at the training was the fact that the best way to look at data when you're doing this kind of work is at the program level. What's going on with your nursing program, what's going on with your welding program, what's going on with your engineering tech program, what's happening with aviation maintenance, what's happening with auto mechanics, what's going on with early childhood education, et cetera. That level of detail, looking at data at that level is what we found in the work that we've done is the most valuable way to look at it. Cluster level data is wrought with problems because, of course, mixed in some of these clusters are some programs that are considered non-traditional for women, some of them are considered non-traditional for men, and some of them are gender neutral. And so it's not a very clean way to look at the data in regards to trying to help you target where you might provide an intervention in terms of improving your performance on your non-traditional measure. But it's the closest thing I had access to give you an example of what this might look like. It would be very interesting for you if you actually did this same analysis for your school's data at the program level to see, certainly 5-year trend analysis would be ideal to see what's going on in terms of non-traditional participation rates for your non-traditional programs at your campus. Any questions about step 1, taking a look at data? Comments? Anybody want to say they're so excited they can't wait to go try this? Do we have any institutional researchers in the group today? No?
Oh.
Do you all know who your institutional research people are?
Yes, we're working with, at the system office level through Alberta Lawson.
Okay.
And I know certain colleges on the line may have some institutional research people aboard, but from the system office level for those colleges in the LCTCS system, Dr. Alberta Lawson is helping us with that.
Great. Good. Well, I would really, the thing about step 1 in the work that we're doing, the pilot site work we're doing, is that this is really powerful because what it does is if you look at it at the program level and you look at it in regards to student population groups, whether it's male, female, race, you can do a race analysis or special population category analysis, it'll really help you get a sense of what's going on, and it'll help you also focus on where you're having problems because then you can make a much clearer decision about what strategy you need to implement in order to change and affect performance. Otherwise, you're sort of shooting blind, and it's not a very efficient or effective way to make decisions about how to spend resources. Okay, then we're going to rip right on now to step 2. Step 2 is identify root causes. It's really about what does the research tell us about non-traditional career preparation and also about what special population students know and what barriers they face. And the reason we don't immediately jump from here to, okay, so now let me tell you about the next best thing that you can try in terms of a strategy is there really is no silver bullet. If there was, I would just have sent those to you and you could be doing something else with your time right now. It really does take an understanding of the gaps in performance between student groups and looking at what the barriers are that those students are facing. And I guess in its best way, thinking about how can you do your own little self-study of what's going on your campus in regards to what those barriers are. So you're likely to find lots of different causes, and there are lots of ways to identify root causes on your campus. And one of the things that we have done for you, in addition to analyzing student data, but one of the things that we've done for you is to review the research literature and distill it into a tool that you can utilize to access research information. And one of the handouts that's posted up on the right-hand side there at the top, you can see the handout button is the 5-step process handout. And if you download that now, it would probably be a good thing for you to have. Actually, that is not the handout. Let me take that back. No, the handout's not there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quickly jump over to my desktop so I can show you an internet page, because I'm gonna encourage you all to go take a look at this. And I don't want you looking at my email probably. Can you all see the NAEP website now?
Yes.
Okay, good. On the right-hand side over here, there is a button. You see my hand, the cursor? It says Non-Traditional Career Preparation, Root Causes and Strategies. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open a window. And if I'm going through this too quickly and it's taking a while to load on your screen, somebody needs to holler and stop me. But what we've done is we've distilled the research literature over the last 20 years, basically, in non-traditional career preparation, and categorized it into these basic areas. So we've got, I'm going to scroll down, which I know is going to make your screens look funny for just a second. So there's a section on education. What are the root causes that are barriers that we see that are related to educational issues like academic proficiency, access to math and science, curriculum, instructional strategies, school and classroom climate, and support services. Career information, materials and guidance, early intervention, and characteristics of the occupation. There's a section on family, what family characteristics, parental involvement are all certainly really important in that family section. Internal and individual notions around what does the research tell us about self-efficacy, attribution theory, and stereotype threat. And lastly, societal issues that create barriers for students, like the media images that students receive, whether they're negative or hopefully the positive ones will remove barriers, peer pressure, role models, and mentoring, and how you as an institution can collaborate with others to help eliminate barriers for your students. This online version of the tool, you can just click on each of these buttons, and you have to do it in your own browser. I don't think if you try it on the screen, it'll work because it's in live meeting. But and learn more about each of these root causes there. There's also, I'm going to click on this root causes and strategies chart, and it will open a PDF window here in a second. This is what I call the cheat sheet version of the document. The actual document itself is, let me shrink this for a second. You'll see it says here, click for downloadable documents. If you click on this part up here, you'll actually download the entire research document, which is about 40 pages long. Because if you click into any one of these root causes, you'll get into, well, let me see, let me just do one. If I click on materials and practices, it actually defines the root cause. You can click here and get information about the theory and the evidence behind this particular root cause. It articulates a few simple strategies here, but if you want more information about strategies, you can click on the strategies, and it opens a page that describes the research around strategies. tell me if I'm going too fast because I don't know how quickly this is loading on your screen. So far, are we doing okay?
Okay.
Okay, good. I'm glad somebody's keeping me on track. And then, down here, you can click on Effective Practices and Resources, and this will take you. These are my favorite pages in this whole piece. Takes you to examples of strategies or resources that relate to effective practices for career guidance materials, interest inventories, recruitment, that kind of thing. And there are hyperlinks all throughout this where you can go get a variety of resources. So those are all there. In this document, there's this sort of click-through sections for every single one of the root causes. So I'll go back to the root causes. So if you click on any one of these other root causes and click through, you can get to all that kinds of information for each of these root causes. Now, let's see. If we go back to, here. This is sort of the cheat sheet page. This is a good handout to download just because it has some very simple information on it for each of the root causes. It identifies the theory that the research indicates, as well as some very simple statements about some strategies. But there's a lot more information included on the web version because we're constantly updating that and adding to it. So that should be a resource for you to go take a look at when you have a chance. And when you're starting to think about what kinds of strategies might you want to implement for non-traditional career preparation, I'd recommend that you take a look at this particular website. So I'm going to go back to the live meeting now. And back to our PowerPoint somewhere here. Are we good? Is it back up on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. I love it when technology works, you know. Now we spent some time at the conference talking about lots of the root causes, and I'm just going to click through a few of these and make some comments, references to some of them that I think might be interesting. But I'm going to encourage you. Unfortunately, we don't have the time today to really dig into this. But I really would encourage you to go back and take a look at certainly what I mentioned, the cheat sheet that has the theory information about each of these root causes, and if you have a time to go look at the online tool as you're working on your local application plan, it'll help to give you some ideas about things you might want to do to eliminate some of these barriers. So, as you know, when we look at academic proficiency, one of the things to consider in this is it's a very predictive measure for women around non-traditional participation. There are significant societal stereotypes about women's lack of ability to do math and science, and people still buy into it, although there's really no research that supports that there's any difference between men and women's ability to do math and science. It happens to be something that's embedded in our societal norms. And so for women to do well in STEM-related fields, high-tech fields, fields that require the use of math and science, their sense of their academic proficiency needs to be significantly higher than it does for men in the same field who don't have to battle that particular stereotype. So it's one thing to keep in mind that women will typically stop out faster if they don't think they're doing well in math and science than men might, and so providing them with the right kinds of supports around academic attainment, tutoring, those kinds of things is really an important way to remove this particular barrier. Now, what I'm going to do today, because I typically don't do this way, I'm going to talk about strategies and the root causes sort of at the same time, although I'll show you when we get through this presentation, if you can actually look more clearly at some of the resources on the website, but we won't have time to do that today. So I'll try to kind of bring things both into consideration. So we did an activity, which you're going to miss, and I mentioned a little bit about certainly access to math and science is important. But one of the things to think about here is the fact that we're basically seeing a shrinking gap in standardized test results, certainly at the secondary level, and maybe not as much at the post-secondary level yet, between men and women, boys and girls, performance on standardized assessments in math and science. But what we're not seeing is girls translating that success into career choice. So helping young women make the connection between their abilities in math and science and career choices that use those skills in those fields is also an important strategy to think about in terms of engaging more women in STEM fields, certainly. Curriculum materials is another important barrier, even though, textbook companies have gotten very smart about including photographs with diverse images. There are still some more subtle messages in the curriculum that speak loudly to the fact that not all individuals are included in terms of, for example, who are the role models that are being represented in the curriculum? What kinds of activities are students engaged in? Are they relevant to their particular interests? Are there even, still bias in terms of using pronouns he or she, or names for occupations that indicate a gender, like fireman rather than firefighter, et cetera? I think we're much better about all of those things, but there's still this issue of relevance is the thing that's really important. When you take a Project Lead the Way course or an engineering tech course, is the first thing you're introduced to, your first hands-on activity, building a mousetrap car, versus engaging in an activity that might be about water filtration systems for third world countries to create potable water to help poor families. One of the things we know about students is they have lots of different interests, and relevance to their particular interests is important. There are lots of instructional strategies also that engage all students in learning, and teachers need to have professional development in how to use them. Everything from very, very simple techniques about the fact that if you wait 7 seconds longer than the typical 2-second wait time of a teacher when they ask a question, you'll engage about 70% more of the students in your class in discussion. There are some very simple things. Cooperative learning design, there's some very significant research about the fact that mixed gendered groups, male and female, equally mixed, are the most effective cooperative learning activities versus single gender groups, or even, and probably the least effective teamwork is when you have a single, one man and all women, or one woman and all men in a group. They tend to get isolated and don't participate. That also plays out in terms of looking at what's going on in student engagement in the classroom, and really, how do teachers manage what's going on in their classrooms, or even right outside their classrooms. Everything from the subtle messages that students get, how engaged they are in their programs, what the expectations are, whether or not sexual harassment is tolerated or even ignored when we're talking about peer-to-peer, teasing, bullying, any of those things. All of those send very strong messages to students about whether they should be there or not. And teachers really need to pay attention to all of this. It's not, we always think about teachers, especially in the post-secondary system, have incredible control and use of content. In other words, they know so much about what they teach, but it can be totally destroyed if the way in which they teach it isn't effective. So pedagogy is as important as content knowledge, and oftentimes if teachers have been through an alternative certification process, or they come out of industry and don't have the proper training in instructional methodology, it's as frustrating for them as it can be for students too. So think about professional development for teachers in this regard. We know that I mentioned this in terms of cooperative learning, but it's also true around student isolation in courses in general. If you have one woman or one man enroll in a course that's non-traditional for them, they're much more likely to drop out or to have trouble integrating into the social structure in the class. They may even suffer decreased performance before they leave. But this is an issue for retention. If you're looking at your non-traditional retention numbers or how special populations are doing in terms of retaining them in programs, think about how do you build community amongst these students so that they don't feel so isolated. Brown bag lunches, support groups, having the second-year students mentoring first-year students, those are all strategies that have been very effective and are in the research that indicate that they help with retention. And they also create community amongst students who feel oftentimes isolated in their programs because they're the only one that's there of their gender or race or special population status. Certainly the school can create a climate that supports students making non-traditional choices and or whether or not they have access to certain programs and support services, but certainly although some of this relates to secondary school, it's not like you all are dealing with issues on the school bus, but there are certainly extracurricular activities, student clubs, organizations, what kind of encouragement or recognition do students receive from faculty, the administration, and others on campus that create a positive support network for their students, and the climate of the school really is, the messages are very strong that doing something non-traditional is perfectly appropriate. Support services, I mentioned this earlier when we talked about, oh no, here we go again. Are you hearing the echo?
Yes. It's mild. Go ahead. Let's
okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know why this is happening. So support services to it, all of these things are things that it's getting worse now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hang on. I'm going to take my headphone off and see if it makes a difference. Hang on. Is that better? No.
Go speak some more.
Is it better? Is the echo still there?
I think it's a little better. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll keep talking. If it gets really bad, somebody scream and we'll all hang up and call back again. And I'm going to have to call the phone company and find out what's going on with this. It's the conference line, I guess. Anyway, career guidance materials and practices. So it's more than just brochures and posters. Although I have to say that we did a little research project with one of the pilot sites where they used posters and they did a marketing campaign, and we actually evaluated the new students that came into the program as a result of this marketing activity. We asked them whether they saw the posters that had been hanging in their sending school and did it influence their decision making, and they all about 78% of the students said yes, which totally blew me away because I always thought posters were a waste of time. So I am a reformed poster person and would encourage you to continue to think about how you can market programs using print and of course audiovisual if you have access to whether it's TV program. I don't know if you all do some sort of like Channel 1 or something, or you have places in your campus where you have media screens and there's information about programs popping up and down about including stuff around non-traditional and making sure that all the images that students see in those situations show diverse people. But also I think how it's more about what additional things beyond that. What kind of outreach activities are you doing? Are you engaging in collaboration with your high schools and middle schools in order to get students thinking early about their career choices and trying to eliminate stereotypes and bias in their decision making back even in the elementary schools, so that by the time those students come to you, they're choosing careers that are based on their particular passions. Do any of you use interest inventories to help your students identify potential career choice at the community college level?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to give you my interest inventory speech, which is many interest inventories are based on students making decisions between do you like to do A or do you like to do B. And if you've never done A and you've done B, you're more likely to choose B, even though you have no idea what A is or what it's about. And so one of the things that we've been working on, because there's some research that indicates that there are some interest inventories that have some potential gender bias in them, is to think about how to use interest inventories as a way to identify students through the career fields that you know they're interested and they know about, and the career fields that they potentially could be interested in but don't know about, that fall outside the careers that are selected as a result of the inventory. And in a counseling situation, to engage students in discussion about, let's take a look first of all at the careers that didn't come up in your interest inventory, and see what do you know about these fields. Have you had some experience? Do you know that you don't want to do this because of some experience you've had with this particular career field or your knowledge of it? Or are there some careers out here that you don't know anything about, you've never tried, and that maybe we need to think about how can you do some exploration around those careers to really make a better decision about your career choice, and then have them take the interest inventory again later after they've done some exploration. It's just a way to think differently about how to use interest inventories as a way to expand student options rather than narrowing them, especially when it relates to a non-traditional career field. So something to think about. There's lots of research around early exposure. The fact that students make career decisions probably by the time let me put it this way, they start to have stereotypes about careers as early as 6 years old. I don't know how many of you have young children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews, but my niece wants to be a princess. She's 6 years old. And, and last time that I visited with her, we were watching a video together about various careers. It was one she chose. I wasn't trying to do this. And one of the segments in the video was about firefighters, and they were touring a firehouse in the video and talking, and there were two young boys, of course, that were there. This is a pretty stereotyped video, and I have to admit, this was not my home. This was my sister's home. And the fact, I send her, non-traditional videos all the time. This wasn't one we were watching. But what blew me away was my niece when I asked her if she knew that she could be a firefighter too, and I talked about a friend of mine who happens to work in our local fire company here. She was shocked that that was an option that she could even have any consideration about. And the next time she came to visit me, they live in California, so they don't come very often, and I'm in Pennsylvania. But when she came to visit, I took her and her brother. She has a twin who's a boy. Her twin is a boy. They came. I took them to the firehouse to tour the firehouse, and her brother was totally not interested, and she was climbing all over all the equipment and looking at everything. Was totally fascinated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. How would you have known? And it just happened that I happened to be sitting in her TV room watching a video with her when I was out there visiting a few months ago. So those kinds of things, really encouraging students to think outside the box. It needs to happen really early on, and I know you all probably think you're way so far away from that, but honestly, if you do it with adults, sometimes you can have the same experience with them as well. There are family characteristics and issues, but I think the most important thing in this particular section is the fact that parents are the #1 influencer of a student's college major and career choice. And so regardless of whether or not, especially with traditional transition students from high school to your colleges, providing a way and a method to engage parents in understanding the decisions that their sons or daughters are making, and influencing them to understand about non-traditional career fields is also very, very important. There's a lot of research around self-efficacy, and I could talk for days about all of these things, but I'd recommend that you go take a look at this, because probably attribution theory and stereotype threat are two of the biggest bodies of research that have been done out there about the very, 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 very subtle messages that it's particularly around women's access to high-skill, high-wage jobs, the subtle messages that they receive about how, they really shouldn't be involved in these areas, and or the way in which women attribute their success typically to external factors. I was lucky in the right place at the right time, and not to the fact that they are knowledgeable and they work really hard and they can do this. They can do math and science. That attributed, that one of the things teachers need to know is that whenever they hear students articulate their success to something external to themselves, is they need to help reinforce, no, it's really the fact that you have done that. You need to own the success, because then success usually breeds success. But there's this notion in the research that women tend to attribute their successes externally. They also internalize failure. So when you don't do well, it's your fault, my fault. It was something I did. And it's not a very positive reinforcing process. So teachers really need to pay attention to this with their students. And the other thing is there's a lot of research around stereotype threat. If any of you have done looking at stereotyping, this is very interesting. And I would recommend a book to you if you're interested in reading about this. It's written by Claude Steele. And it's called Whistling, like Whistling Vivaldi, V-I-V-A-L-D-I. Vivaldi is a very famous composer of operas. And anyway, the book has nothing to do with composing operas. It's all about stereotypes and stereotype threat and how it impacts student performance. But I won't. The title of the book is a great story. That's the first chapter of the book. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in reading more about it and learning how stereotypes affect student performance, get the book and read it. It's really excellent. And so that's one little suggestion. The second suggestion I'd make to you about trying to understand or improving your own knowledge about this field and certainly understanding your own biases is to take the implicit association test. Now, the link to it is actually on this page, but if you Google Project Implicit, I-M-P-L-I-C-I-T, like spelled on the screen, it'll take you to a website called the Implicit Association Test. It was developed by, there are 5 universities, Harvard, University of Virginia, I can't remember all the rest of them, that worked together and developed this association assessment to identify implicit bias in a variety of things. And when you go there, you see there's lots of different types of tests you can take. One of them happens to be on the association between gender and career. And it will help you determine how biased you are about the association between careers and gender. The fun thing about the test is that when you go on the website, the very first thing that it says on it is, if you don't like, it's sort of the disclaimer. If you don't blame us if you don't like the results. It's in much more technical language than that. But it's a really good sort of eye-opener. We're all biased, trust me, even somebody like me who really studies this stuff and pays attention to it. I catch myself doing things all the time. And taking this test was sort of an eye-opener for me as well, and there's some other good ones there too, so I'd encourage you to do that. But we all have biases. We all have our own sense of what we like and dislike. Or our own experiences in this world that create by our own internal biases. But what's important is that you are aware of them, and so that you can catch yourself when when things trigger them, and also to encourage you to pay attention to those things that may affect the way in which you interact with students. There's lots of media representation out there that's both positive and negative, whether it's going to Bimbo City to shop online. And all the crazy body images that we're getting about women recently, and there's lots of things in there, that are not particularly positive for men as well. Versus this case is a poster that Timberlake Boots, an advertisement they did about a young woman who works on the Appalachian trails, and she pulls on her boots and makes a difference. She's not a model; she's a model person. It's a great ad, but there are lots of things like that we need to see more of if corporate America would get more engaged in this. Or, for example, here's a poster that was done by the Oregon Center for Nursing. Are you man enough to be a nurse? And all of these men are in their play clothes, but they're all also nurses. And a good way to put something out there in the hallways of your nursing program to have men consider this as an option. Mr. Goodwrench isn't always a Mr. This is an advertisement that GM ran for a while in some magazines. I haven't seen it in a while, but another good, sort of image piece to think about in terms of how does the media impact what your students are thinking. And there's lots of TV shows and that sort of that kind of media also that tends to impact students' decision. I know when all the crime scene investigator programs came out, there was this huge rush of students interested in forensic science. I don't know how many of you now have forensic science programs on your campus, but I think the TV programs definitely impacted that. Student attitudes and peer influence. Peer influence, although maybe in your world, is not nearly as bad as adolescent social norms that occur in high school settings, but I'm sure even with your younger students you often see this idea about being concerned about what do my friends think of me, how might I look if I go into a non-traditional field, and certainly notions around homophobia for men accessing non-traditional career programs as well as women exists, and oftentimes peer pressures can be really strong. So paying attention to how students interact with one another is an important component of this, and creating programs that support tolerance among students and peer support. I think probably when you think about some of the most effective programs we've seen have been programs that have created support networks and systems for students pursuing non-traditional careers, particularly retention strategies, where they're connecting students together in either a support group or older students with younger students, students that are in their second year versus first year. Those have really proven to be very effective strategies. Now, lastly, the biggest body of knowledge in the research is on role models. There is unequivocally, this is the biggest area that you should be focusing on in terms of strategy implementation. How do you engage students in seeing people that look like them pursuing these career fields? And there are many, many, many ways to do it, whether it's bringing role models into the classroom, engaging them in activities with students on your campus, doing it through virtual media, having them Skype or participate in something. There's actually a program called MentorNet. If you Google MentorNet online, you can see it. It's an online mentoring system. It's specifically focused on STEM fields, but that is all set up specifically for connecting individuals with role models in the STEM arena across the country. There's certainly social networking mechanisms to do this now that we never had before. But using mentors, role models, can be very important, and having them be real. This is so I shared a couple of resources with folks. This is a link actually to a video. They're 4 women who work as engineers for Cisco Systems, and it's a great, fantastic video. I encourage you to take a look at that. And this is a video that was done around a group of male nurses who are in California. And again, another really good piece that would be a good resource for you to check out later on. And then we did an activity. So I talked about solutions sort of at the same time as root causes a little bit, but there is, I have to look and see. Oh, sorry, I'm flipping back and forth here. Let me go back to where I was there. When you think about what solutions to implement, if you know which student populations you're trying to impact, if you disaggregated your data and done a performance gap analysis that would give you a clear picture about where the intervention might be placed or with whom, and then second, and also where, because if you look at your data disaggregated by program, you'll also see which programs might need help in terms of increasing their performance rates. And then clearly understanding what barriers your students are facing is also really important. And and making sure that the strategy that you're going to implement affects those barriers directly. Because the worst thing is for you to listen to me talk about, let's say it's non-traditional support groups or something like that, and for you to go back assuming that that's an issue for students on your campus, so you implement one and your retention rates don't change because what's going on in your campus is your students are already doing that informally, and it's not something that they needed. So you got to make sure you really understand what are the barriers that students are facing, what are their particular needs, so that you can implement a solution that's most effective. Now, the solution piece of this is really embedded in that online tool that I shared with you. We actually had a series of breakout sessions, and we talked about various strategies that were going on in regards to English language learners, single parents, displaced homemakers, some economically disadvantaged students, those kinds of things. And those workshops were conducted by other specialists who came in and did the training on that weekend. But all of the things that they talked about are pieces that you can find on our website. So I'm going to encourage you, I'm going to go back to the website for a second because I want to show you one other thing that I would like to have you take a look at. I think we're going to go there. There we go. And I'm going to go back to the NAEP homepage. And on the left-hand side of the homepage here, you'll see some information about our Professional Development Institute. And all of the presentations, actually the presentations that were given at the Louisiana conference, I solicited some people who had come and presented at our national conference to come down to Louisiana to repeat their workshops. So many of those presentations, and certainly many, many more, are included on our, I'm opening up the website page here for the conference itself. Things are loading a little slowly on my desktop, so it might be really slow for you. But you can actually access all the workshop information and everything directly from this page. Down here where it says 16 workshops Tuesday and Thursday, the workshops cover diverse topics that are directly relevant to your work, and you can just click on the workshops link, and that should take you to a page. These are all the descriptions of the workshops, and all of the workshop presentations are, at least the ones that we have information from, are there. And as we continue to try to get these from conference presenters, we'll continue to post them. So there will be some good things for you to look at there in terms of strategies as well. Any questions about any of those things at this point?
No, so far so good for me.
Heads are spinning. Mine is. All right. So I'm going to talk next just for a few minutes about evaluation, because one of the things that your local application plan is going to ask you for is there's some objectives that you need to include in your local application plan for how you're going to measure the success of your particular activity. So I'm going to give you the fastest version of step 4 here quickly and talk to you about how do you create an evaluation plan for your particular activity that you're going to implement. There are 2 types of evaluations. There's formative evaluations, which basically measure process. I'm going to talk quickly about those because those are often the types of evaluations that we think about and we do. But there's summative evaluations. How do we measure the impact of what you did? In other words, if I'm cooking the soup, the process of did I do a good job of following the recipe, and anyway, did it turn out right versus did I kill everyone when they ate it? So think about how those things play out in terms of 2 different types of evaluation. And the other thing is that there are very clear things to remember about when you write objectives. So when you write an objective, it needs to be very specific to the activity that you're completing, and that needs to be very specific in terms of what it's going to measure. It needs to be measurable, so there needs to be, and the thing I always think about, there's got to be a number in the objective, and a word that defines some measurable piece, like increase or decrease or change or something like that, that says it's a defining term. It needs to be achievable. In other words, that, it's realistic. It's not like you're trying to, shoot the moon here. Relevant to the activity that you're doing, and also that, so that it's measuring what you think is going to have direct impact, not something totally different. And sometimes we see that in grant applications, and that it's time limited, that it actually says when you're going to measure it, that there is a date in the objective itself. So, keeping that in mind, let's talk first of all about process evaluations. It's what we do well, and it's often these kinds of things, like attendance, response rates to invitation, satisfaction of you in terms of how things went in the process, or even satisfaction of the participants with the workshop. Yay, it was good. We all had a good time. 10,000 people showed up on Saturday, and they all went home and did exactly what they've been doing for the last 50 years on Monday. Not exactly what you had in mind, right? So remember, process measures that do not measure outcome, and they're not, in my estimation, adequate or enough to measure whether or not what you've done is effective. But some examples of some process objectives are, like, for example, 50% of the participants will bring at least one parent or guardian to the event, if that's something that you want to measure. So it's measurable, it's related to an activity. This happens to be a reception for parents and their children about non-traditional career programs. And so we would measure this. And there are tools for measuring process that are typical: outreach records, response records, attendance records, demographics of your participants. You can also have questions on your evaluation instrument that measure process, and certainly any kind of a planning timeline or planning document that you had to determine whether or not you actually met your intended deadlines for various things. So that should all look fairly familiar to all of you. Summative or outcome evaluations are really what I consider to be true evaluations of impact, and these are the things that I would encourage all of you to make sure you have some objectives in your application plan that measure these kinds of things. So short-term objectives are things like increase in awareness, increase in knowledge, changes in attitudes, changes in behavior. These are the things that you want to see, or that you might be able to measure even at the end of an activity or shortly after some intervention occurs. Long-term measurements are things like enrollment, achievement, completion, graduation, transition. Do those sound familiar to you? Those are all of the Perkins measures. And so those are long-term measurements. Although ultimately your long-term objective might be to increase female enrollment in your welding program, and the strategy you've decided to implement is you're going to have role models. You have some women who are in welding positions in industry in your community come in and do an activity one day with students on campus who not necessarily, obviously not women in the welding program, but might be interested, and engaging them in this activity with the hope that you might increase their intent to enroll in the program. Certainly you're going to measure whether they do, but it'd be nice to know whether you even affected their intent before they actually enrolled, because that's a little bit longer term measurement. So again, short-term objectives are things like after participating in Focus Your Future event, 50% of the participating students will show a 1-point increase in their willingness to consider enrolling in the pre-engineering program at the high school, in your case, at the technical college. So the point here is that we've obviously got to ask this question on the evaluation instrument, and we can actually measure student intent by the fact that they're going to indicate on this Likert scale, a 5-point scale, how willing they are now. You could even do this as a pre-post, for example, assessment. How willing are you before the event started? Now that the event is over, you give the same question, and hopefully their Likert scale response will be increased. That's a measurable change and can really, I think, measure the effectiveness of what your activity did. So there are short-term measurement tools like pre-post attitude assessments or knowledge assessments like I just described, or questions on evaluation instruments that ask them to reflect now. Would they be more interested in this or more willing to do something, or do they know more now than they did, or even some very simple content knowledge questions about the event can be included. Or the other option too is, with the advent of technology, a month after the intervention occurs or the strategy might be implemented, you can do a post-activity survey via the internet or online or email and asking students to respond. Again, long-term measures. Let's take a look quickly at some long-term measures here. Long-term objectives are things like the participation rate girls in the Gateway to Technology course at the middle school will increase by 5 percentage points a year following the implementation of the Focus Your Future event as measured by Perkins reported enrollment data. So it has all the SMART components to it, and it's a longer-term measurement. It's an enrollment measurement that's going to take a year before we actually see a shift in this particular measure. So you'd want to do both this type of evaluation and the short-term measurement as well to determine whether or not the activity increased intent, and now we're looking for actual action. So long-term measurement tools are typically things that are maintained by your administration or institutional research office, or even reported to a funder or your agency, the system agency. But things like demographic data, attendance records, achievement records, graduation records, and certainly your Perkins core indicator data. I want to encourage you to take a look at this PowerPoint because it has some good resource information on it, but there are 2 webinars that we've conducted on assessing effectiveness and of your program's activities. So they're both posted on the STEM Equity Pipeline website. I'll show you where to find them in just a second. And then this down here is a link to a website, aweonline.org. It's actually a website about how to assess student performance, and it has on it a whole series of various types of survey instruments, research briefs on evaluation, and would give you some really good ideas about the kinds of questions you might want to ask on an evaluation document. And this is you can see that these are actually the high school and middle school page that I happen to make a screenshot of here, but they're also college questions as well. So I'm going to flip over to the STEM Equity Pipeline site now for a second and show you where you can find, yes, I think I'm going to do this, those webinars that I mentioned. So if you go to our website, napequity.org, on the right-hand side of the home page, or any page of the site, you'll see there's a link here. It says STEM Equity Pipeline. Click on that button, and that will take you to this site. We have a National Science Foundation grant where we're working with 11 states and integrating gender equity into STEM teacher professional development in those states, and so that's what this site's all about. So if you want to dig around in here, feel free. But I wanted to share with you where you can find these archived webinars. And actually, we'll post this webinar also in this same location. So under the Professional Development menu, there is, you'll see here, it says STEM Equity Pipeline Archived Webinars. You click on that, and you'll open up a page that lists all the webinars. And I'm going to, well, maybe I'll do the page down, which I think, maybe I'm not going to. Here we go. So I just went down the page a little ways, and there's effective program assessments. You'll see there's 2 webinars there, both done by Tricia Berry, who's the Director of Women in Engineering Program at the University of Texas at Austin, and is one of the researchers who worked on that website that I showed you before that has all those assessment tools on it. So you can find that on our website. Okay. So let's go back to where we were. All right, we have about 9 minutes left, and I'm just going to open it for questions. I know that I have dumped a whole lot of information on you in a very, this is like the worst way to do this, so I'm admitting this right now. There's a lot of information there. There are a lot of resources. Realize that you're getting, you know, an hour and 45-minute professional development that was a day and a half originally, where you don't have a chance to process any of this. But my email address is there. If you have any questions as you're starting to think about things, feel free to email me. I'm actually not going to be available for the next 10 days, so don't do it in 10 days. You have to wait till after the 24th of May. I'm leaving for vacation this afternoon, and I'll be back on the 24th. But I'd be happy to help you out if you have any questions. But now's a good time to ask if there's something that's on your mind.
Maybe. This is Angela Kennedy, and I'm sorry I joined late. I had a student in my office when the call started this morning.
That's okay.
The slide presentation that you're going through, I did not get that as an attachment. Is there a way that we can have this PowerPoint?
Yes. Are you on the live meeting now?
Yes, I am.
So if you go, this will be good review for everybody. If you go to the top of the page, the gray bar at the top, you'll see 3 pieces of paper layered one on top of the other. And if you put your cursor on it, it pops up a little window that says Handouts, and click on it. And when you click on it, it'll open a handout page, and you can download all of these files. 2 of them, there are 2 PowerPoints that I used. There's the evaluation instrument, which you'll actually receive an email from Greg Nagy with the evaluation later today, which I'd appreciate it if you would complete and return. There's also a little worksheet that we used at the workshop that might help you think through this process a little bit, and then there's also a handout document there as well.
Well, thanks. This has been really informative. Certainly, I know for myself, probably when I start working with the lab, I'll have questions.
Right.
When I really start working with it more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's hard, you know, until you start to dig around in this stuff and start thinking. We spent a lot of time in discussion at the training itself, and which was very valuable, and this is not so conducive to that. So, any other questions from anybody? You must either all be like sound asleep or left already or like overwhelmed with information, which is perfectly appropriate.
It's a lot to take in. I'm sure we all wish we were going on vacation with you.
Yeah. Well, all right, then I guess I've accomplished my goal. I've dumped all this on you now. Let me just say again, I would really encourage you to go and take a look at for my own edification, I'm going to do this, go back to the web page where the root causes thing that's on the website. So all of our websites have these buttons down the right-hand side. So any page that you go on either the STEM Equity Pipeline site or the NAEP site, these buttons will always be there. This button, the one that says Non-Traditional Career Preparation, Root Causes and Strategies, I really would encourage you to go there and dig around. It'll help you align the barriers you think your students are facing with strategies that can really remove those, at least the research-based strategies. And so I'm just going to click on the page and to remind you what it looks, whoops, did I close it? No, I think I just shrunk it. There we go, to remind you what it looks like. But you can click through all of these root causes and it'll just explain what the root cause is, get you into the strategies section and then into resources. And there are all these online examples of and resources to help you when you think about trying to remove this particular barrier for your students. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Again, you'll get an email from Greg Nagy with the evaluation for the webinar. I'd encourage you to fill that out, give me a little feedback. I know there's a lot of information here, and please, send me an email in 10 days if you have any questions.
Okay, we'll do it.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.